So let's move on to the second hypothesis, so moving past this idea that each of these three stories, the scientific, classical, and Abrahamic stories, demonstrate an initiation into a materialistic way of being. So the second hypothesis is that we get past those limitations, that the stories continue, and when they continue, they invert the setup. Just like a good inciting incident is inverted by the climax, here it happens in these stories. And so the progenitors themselves become freed from their material limitation. The guys who save them, Hercules and Christ, they also transcend their material limitations and achieve atonement with the divine. And Einstein, which we've said multiple times, and it's very simple, so we just say it simply over and over, but Einstein had a huge influence on undermining the limitations of reductive materialism as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. So now to focus in on the mythological side of hypothesis 2, the liberation of progenitors is probably the most important part, because I take the progenitors themselves as symbolic of humanity proper, in the same way you might see that with Eve and Pandora, just not following that thread right now. But Prometheus and Adam, who were both left at the end of their stories, chained and restrained to matter and stone, are freed by Hercules and Christ. And as mentioned, this is, even though it's not in the New Testament, it's certainly in a lot of old stories about Christ and Adam, and it's, as mentioned, represented in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is inhabited by pretty much every denomination prior to the Protestant Reformation. So, this, as mentioned, this transcendence from material limitation is followed through with the religious traditions. So in the classical world, the Orphics, Pythagoreans, Platonists, and others really continue this idea of the soul as imprisoned in the body and the need for the soul to transcend the body. But it's not just material and cosmological, it's not just metaphysical, it's not just about the soul being trapped in the body. It's about, especially when you look at the Pythagoreans, it's about the psyche and the way that we think being imprisoned by the influences of the material world. So our minds become corrupted by material limitation. And then you see it in the Abrahamic tradition with the Essenes, Cistercians, Sufis, and many more. Those are just an example of each of the, Judeo-Christian, Islamic. And so, looking at the actual characters of Heracles and Christ, there's this great story, the Stoics, because even when it wasn't about transcending, even if you didn't believe in a soul and transcending the body, some of the classical philosophers still believed in transcending the influences of the emotions. So for the Stoics, they saw the lion skin that was on Hercules as symbolic of his divine body. And it was actually when he took off the lion skin and put on the cloak coated in blood that's, according to the Stoics, symbolized flesh, that he was able to die. So it was only with the fall into flesh for Hercules that he could die. And just like Christ's body can't be found in the tomb and in the sepulchre, Heracles' bones disappear from the pyre. So each of these two, the liberation of the progenitors and the liberation of the heroes themselves, follow this transcendence from material limitation. Philosophically, scientifically, as mentioned, the material limitation is transcended by, kind of once and for all, by Einstein's theory equals mc squared, his theory of relativity, which shows that matter is transmutable into energy. And so once you show that matter is transmutable into energy, it's hard to maintain the idea that everything reduces fundamentally to matter as the absolute foundation and limitation of all things. And not only that, but we like to, especially with the Newtonian paradigm, when we reduce everything to matter, we like to reduce everything to atomic matter. And the theory of the atom, a nice twist, by the way, I didn't plan to mention this, but I can't help it. Einstein's given credit for proving the existence of the atom, even though he's also, as I'm about to explain, the guy that blew it out of the water. So he, based on this concept, this behavior, phenomenon called Brownian motion, he proved mathematically the existence of atoms, but then he also then showed with the photon, which was a name that stuck later, the synthesis of the particle and the wave in the behavior of a single entity he called a photon, and that undermined the fundamental vision of matter as endlessly particulated. So that's the end of hypothesis 2, that each of these, the progenitors, the heroes, and the scientific tradition all show an eventual transcendence from reductive materialism and material limitation. Finally, the third hypothesis is that the transition, the actual transition itself, is the fulcrum for that transition is the wave or elixir, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So the progenitors, Prometheus, he's freed. The actuating ultimate agent that enables him to break free from the stone is the blood that Heracles' arrow is dipped in, that kills the eagle that's defending Prometheus. And when you look at the old images, a lot of the old pottery, the liberation moment is the moment where he kills the eagle. They don't show him taking him off the stone, they show him killing the eagle. And the only reason he was able to kill that eagle is because the Hydra blood, and it's that same Hydra blood that'll take his own life and free him from the flesh. But before we get to that, Adam is also freed by blood. It's when the blood trickles down from Christ to baptize Adam. So both of those moments of liberation are enacted by blood and fluids. So Heracles and Christ also achieve atonement, and when they do, their atonement is also hugely influenced and centered around waves and fluids. So, for example, Heracles' atonement, like as mentioned, it's the blood it's the Hydra blood that enables him to die. But then it's also when he does die, when he achieves union with the divine, it's because and through the marriage to Hebe, the cupbearer of the gods, and it's through the drinking of the nectar. And because of Lance, and because I was looking at actually a presentation that he gave, and he was talking about the Nicaea and talking about the prefix Ne, of course, Nek. I looked up nectar, and it's like, I wish I could remember the exact meaning, but it's like the staying off, it's like the putting off of that which is the underworld descent. It's like that which frees you from the death of the Nicaea. So anyway, the nectar is what enables Christ to Hercules to achieve union. And then you have Christ himself, you have the wine at the Last Supper, the blood of the Passion, the blood wine of communion, and the blood wine of the Holy Grail are all symbolic of his liberation. And so whether it's the cup of the gods of Hebe or the Holy Grail, both of these great heroes are, and their atonement specifically is symbolized and in large part actuated by the elixirs themselves. And as mentioned, the Einstein and philosophical and scientific tradition, when he brings an end to the reductive materialistic thought, it is by integrating wave dynamics into the particle to come up with this idea that would become called the photon. So again, it's the actual integration of the elixir that enables the shift. So to conclude, really there's I'm really trying to show one major thing, that the entry into that each of the three traditions combine to make somewhat of a consistent Western meta-narrative, which is an entry into and transcendence from material limitation by way of symbolic elixirs and or theoretical waves. And so ultimately, as cool as I think it is that there is a meta-narrative and is epistemologically meaningful as it is to find something consistent between the three traditions, the question is, why does it matter? And more specifically, why are waves or elixirs associated with transcendence? Why is the Holy Grail the symbol that it is? Why are the elixirs the symbol that they are? And most specifically in these stories. And so to get to this, I've got to get to the very heart of this dissertation and of my focus, and it really comes through in a certain thought experiment. So imagine a bunch of material entities, right? If you try and combine material things, they inevitably will bounce off each other or break. Material things cannot share space, just plain and simple. And my body, if I see myself as my body, if I project that back into myself, then I see myself as fundamentally isolated and unable to unify with anything. So if you get your sense of reality from your senses, from a materialistic mode of seeing, and you limit your way of conceptualizing and understanding the universe to materialism and to this atomistic reductive attitude, then you will have no hope, no structure, no metaphysics, no form through which you can conceive of yourself as unified, through which you can conceive of yourself as one with anything. Because, again, things stay divided. if that's the case, and reality really is materialistic, we better just come to terms with this and accept our isolation. But I came to realize when I was in a Plato class and as an undergraduate studying the Parmenides that the challenges of one and manyness are only challenges to material things. So I realized Pythagoras has this theory of the harmony of the spheres, and I came to realize that it must have had a huge influence on Plato and his notion of harmony, and that Plato, in this riddling text where he's kind of teasing the problem out, I think that he's trying to get us to realize that the harmony, the music, is actually the solution to the problem of one and manyness. And let me explain what I mean. So here, if I have a microphone recording an entire symphony orchestra, every wave you could possibly create with every instrument there, they're all individual waves when they come off the string, but as soon as they hit the air, when they reach the microphone, they all combine as a single wave. Waves have no problem with one and manyness. So the microphone records a single wave, which goes through the wire as a single signal and a single wire, and comes out of a speaker as a single vibration. And how is it that just a circular speaker, a circular cone, can vibrate in one dimension and make all the music of an entire symphony? It's because waves don't have a problem with one and manyness. And so I believe that, you know, one of the great secrets of the Orphics, one of the great secrets of those who worship the lyre and the Grail, is that fluids, is that waves are actually a form that enable union. And if existential union, if union with the divine, with lover, with God, with nature, with cosmos is important to you, and it's important to me, then you need to have an actual metaphysic, an actual structure that can enable such union. And until there is a recognition of one, you're forced just to deny the materialistic structure and fight against that. And I believe that the form of waves actually enable such union. And it's not just union, it's not just me with anything, it's also to recognize that everything in nature isn't divided by its bits. If I just think materialistically, especially in the Enlightenment attitude, I see everything is fundamentally divided from everything else. And to me, this is the wasteland, this is desert, this is sand, which is just infinitely divided and inevitably, unhealably isolated. But you water the desert and you get the stories of the Nile. So ultimately, to me, I came into this really thinking, okay, well, I was 21 years old, lots of problems in the world, 2012 is coming up, what am I going to do to save it? We've all probably been through some of that. And I was thinking about how cool it was that the Buddha's wife was trying to heal and feed people while the Buddha was trying to come up with some insight that would save the world from an enormous amount of suffering with this breakthrough thought. So I was pursuing this, and I thought materialism is at the core and heart of our cultural problems. But what I came to find, of course, I wanted to write a dissertation that would change the world and do something absolutely breakthrough, some message that nobody had ever heard before. And what I came to find in studying it is that this message, I'm convinced, is a crucial message already embedded in the Christian tradition, already embedded in the classical tradition, coming through in our contemporary history. And ultimately I feel like it's more and more I explain this to people and it feels less important because materialism has less and less of a hold. So I came to realize that this may not be a dissertation to change the world so much as one to observe what's happening, and that's where I'm at with it now. And maybe I should just conclude by, that's my last slide. Yeah, I should just conclude by saying thank you all for coming here. It's been great to be able to present to all of you. Thanks.